Jan-Michael Vincent was once one of Hollywood's brightest stars, ruggedly handsome, effortlessly charismatic, and a natural action hero. From The Mechanic to Airwolf, he dominated screens in the 70s and 80s, becoming the highest-paid TV actor of his time. But behind the fame was a life filled with addiction, violence, and self-destruction. His meteoric rise was followed by an even more dramatic fall, leaving him a forgotten relic of Hollywood's excess. This is the tragic story of Jan-Michael Vincent, the man who had it all and lost everything. Jan-Michael Vincent was born on July 15, 1944, in Denver, Colorado, into a family with a troubled past. His paternal lineage was filled with criminals, bank robbers, counterfeiters, and outlaws who made their living outside the law. His grandfather was both a bank robber and a counterfeiter in the 1920s and 1930s. One of his uncles was shot and killed by law enforcement while wanted for a robbery in Oregon. Two other uncles were jailed for bank robbery in 1931, and just a year later, his grandfather and another uncle were arrested for the same crime. With such a background, it would have been easy to assume that Jan-Michael might follow in their footsteps. But his father, Lloyd Vincent, chose a completely different path, one that would have a profound impact on Jan's own life. Unlike his relatives, Lloyd rejected a life of crime in favor of discipline and duty. In 1941, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces and became a B-25 bomber pilot during World War II. His military career shaped his values and work ethic, and when the war ended, he settled into a more stable life. The family eventually moved to Hanford, California, where Lloyd owned a signage business. Growing up in a small, peaceful agricultural town was a stark contrast to the outlaw past of his ancestors. And for young Jan-Michael, it was a place filled with both opportunities and limitations. Jan was naturally intelligent and charming, but he lacked direction. Academics never truly interested him, and he was far more drawn to the excitement of the outdoors. He spent much of his time surfing, partying, and embracing the laid-back California lifestyle. Though his father tried to instill discipline in him, Jan was more of a free spirit, uninterested in following a strict path. After high school, he enrolled at Ventura College but dropped out soon after. Without a clear plan for his future, he decided to follow in his father's footsteps and enlisted in the California Army National Guard in the 1960s. His time in the National Guard gave him structure, but it wasn't long before fate intervened and took his life in an entirely unexpected direction. California in the 1960s was the epicenter of surf culture, youthful rebellion, and Hollywood dreams. Jan-Michael, with his striking good looks, athletic build, and effortless charisma, fit right into this scene. He spent his days on the beaches, surfing and socializing, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. One day, while hanging out on a California beach, he was noticed by a Hollywood talent scout. Something about him, his rugged handsomeness, his effortless cool, stood out immediately. Despite having no acting experience, he was approached and encouraged to audition for film roles. Hollywood was always searching for fresh new faces, and Jan-Michael Vincent had the kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. In 1967, at just 22 years old, he landed his first role in the TV movie The Bandits, starring Robert Conrad. That same year, he appeared in The Hardy Boys, The Mystery of the Chinese Junk. It was a sudden and unexpected break, but Jan-Michael took to acting with ease. With no formal training, he relied on his natural presence, confidence, and undeniable screen appeal. Jan-Michael Vincent's career in the late 1960s and 1970s was defined by versatility, rapid success, and an effortless ability to transition between television and film. From his early days as a Universal Studios contract player to becoming a leading man in Hollywood, he quickly established himself as one of the most charismatic and bankable stars of his generation. Vincent's first credited acting role came in 1967 when he was cast in The Bandits, a TV movie directed by and starring Robert Conrad. That same year, he appeared in The Hardy Boys, The Mystery of the Chinese Junk, a family-friendly adventure film that introduced him to a wider audience. These early roles helped him gain attention, and Universal Studios soon signed him, giving him a steady stream of work in various television series. In 1968, Vincent made an appearance in the police procedural drama Dragnet 1968 in the episode titled The Grenade. He played a muscular high school student who suffered an acid attack at the hands of a disturbed classmate, delivering a memorable and emotionally charged performance that showed his ability to handle intense dramatic roles. That same year, he landed a recurring part as Link in the Banana Splits Adventure Hour, a live-action adventure series that aired as part of Hanna-Barbera's programming. Although the show was aimed at younger audiences, it gave Vincent valuable on-screen experience and further increased his visibility. His first starring role came in 1969 when he was cast in the primetime soap opera The Survivors, starring Hollywood icon Lana Turner and heartthrob George Hamilton. This was a major opportunity as it placed him in a high-profile project alongside established stars. Unfortunately, the show failed to gain traction and was canceled mid-season, but Vincent's performance did not go unnoticed. That same year, he appeared in one of his most significant early film roles in The Undefeated, a major Hollywood production starring John Wayne and Rock Hudson. Vincent played Bubba Wilkes, a Confederate soldier, marking his first experience working with some of the biggest legends in the industry. In the credits of The Undefeated, his name was listed as Michael Vincent, a small but notable moment in his early career. Throughout this period, Vincent also made guest appearances in popular television shows, including Bonanza and Lassie. These roles allowed him to experiment with different genres, proving that he could seamlessly transition between action, drama, and family entertainment. By the early 1970s, Jan-Michael Vincent had moved beyond being a contract player and was beginning to garner critical praise for his work. His breakthrough role came in 1970 with the TV movie Tribes, also known as the soldier who declared peace in some international markets. He played a free-spirited hippie draftee who clashes with a tough Marine boot camp instructor, played by Darren McGavin. The film's anti-war themes resonated strongly with audiences, and Vincent's nuanced performance was widely praised. This was a key moment that proved he was more than just a good-looking action star. He had the acting chops to take on complex and thought-provoking roles. Vincent continued to build on this success with critically acclaimed performances in major feature films. In 1971, he co-starred with Robert Mitchum in Going Home, delivering a deeply emotional performance that further cemented his reputation as a serious actor. He continued making guest appearances on popular TV shows, including Gunsmoke, and in 1972, he starred in one of his most famous films, The Mechanic, alongside Charles Bronson. The film, a gritty action thriller about an elite hitman training a young protege, became a cult classic, and Vincent's performance as the apprentice assassin showcased his ability to hold his own alongside an established action star like Bronson. By the mid-1970s, Jan-Michael Vincent was one of the hottest names in Hollywood. He began landing lead roles in major films, including The World's Greatest Athlete, 1973, a Disney comedy where he starred alongside Tim Conway and John Amos. Around this time, he also starred in the TV movie Sandcastles, 1972, and Deliver Us from Evil 1973, playing opposite George Kennedy. However, it was in 1974 that he shocked audiences with his most controversial role yet, playing Buster Lane in Buster and Billy. In this romantic drama, Vincent delivered one of the most daring performances of his career, including a full frontal nude scene, which was groundbreaking for mainstream Hollywood films at the time. The role helped him shed his clean-cut image and establish himself as a risk-taking actor, unafraid of challenging roles. Following this, he starred in a string of successful films that further solidified his place in Hollywood. Bite the Bullet, 1975, saw him starring alongside Gene Hackman, James Coburn, and Candice Bergen, while White Line Fever, 1975, became a cult classic in the action genre, proving his ability to lead a film on his own. His diverse range continued with the war film Baby Blue Marine, 1976, and the thriller Shadow of the Hawk, 1976, where he co-starred with Marilyn Hassett. In 1977, Vincent took on another ambitious role in Damnation Alley, a post-apocalyptic science fiction film based on Roger Zelazny's novel. Though the film itself received mixed reviews, Vincent's performance was well received, and the film has since gained a cult following among sci-fi fans. In 1978, he starred in two of his most iconic films, Big Wednesday, a surfing drama that perfectly aligned with Vincent's real-life passion for surfing, and Hooper, in which he played a young stuntman alongside Burt Reynolds. Hooper was a massive success, further proving Vincent's status as a top-tier leading man. By the late 1970s, Jan-Michael Vincent had secured his place among Hollywood's elite. He had successfully transitioned from television to major film roles, starring alongside some of the biggest names in the industry. With his combination of talent, charisma, and screen presence, he seemed destined for a long and illustrious career. By the early 1980s, Jan-Michael Vincent's career was still thriving, though signs of instability were beginning to surface. Coming off a decade filled with major film roles and rising stardom, he entered the new decade with a mix of action-packed and dramatic performances that further showcased his versatility. However, as his personal struggles with substance abuse intensified, his career trajectory began to shift. In 1980, he starred in Defiance, a gritty, gang-themed drama in which he played a working-class Manhattan resident who takes a stand against the violent gangs terrorizing his neighborhood. Co-starring Danny Aiello, the film received only a limited theatrical release, but it gave Vincent another opportunity to portray a rugged anti-hero, a role that played well to his strengths. That same year, he appeared in The Return, a science fiction film that was released directly to television and home video. While neither of these projects were major box office successes, they kept him active and in the public eye. In 1981, Vincent starred opposite Kim Basinger in Hard Country, a drama exploring the cultural divide between small-town life and big-city dreams. His portrayal of a rough-edged working-class man struggling to hold on to a relationship earned him praise, and the film helped establish Basinger as a rising star. By 1983, Vincent continued to take on action-heavy roles, starring in Last Plane Out, a war-themed thriller. But his most significant role that year came in the television miniseries The Winds of War, where he portrayed Byron Henry, Briney, a U.S. Navy officer navigating personal and military conflicts leading up to World War II. The miniseries was a massive success, drawing millions of viewers and reaffirming Vincent's ability to handle complex, dramatic roles. His performance stood out among a large ensemble cast, proving that he could deliver depth beyond his action hero persona. However, it was in 1984 that Jan-Michael Vincent landed the role that would define his career, Stringfellow Hawk in Airwolf. The action espionage series, co-starring Ernest Borgnine, centered around a high-tech military helicopter and covert operations, blending high-stakes action with Cold War intrigue. Vincent's portrayal of the mysterious, brooding pilot was a perfect fit, as his rugged, rebellious screen presence gave the character an undeniable edge. Airwolf became a massive hit, especially overseas, and Vincent became a household name. At the peak of the show's popularity, he was making $200,000 per episode, an unprecedented salary for television at the time, making him the highest-paid actor in American television. He was at the height of his fame, cementing his legacy as one of the most recognizable action stars of the era. However, behind the scenes, his personal life was unraveling. The intense pressures of stardom, combined with his long-standing battles with alcohol and drugs, began interfering with his ability to perform. He frequently arrived on set intoxicated, struggled to remember lines, and often caused production delays due to his erratic behavior. The network tolerated his actions for a while, but by the third season, it became clear that his off-screen struggles were damaging the show. Eventually, Airwolf was canceled, marking a turning point in Vincent's career. After Airwolf, major studios were hesitant to work with him, and he found himself taking on smaller budget and lower-profile projects. In 1991, he starred in the suspense thriller Raw Nerve opposite Tracy Lords, a film that failed to make an impact but found a small audience on home video. By the mid-1990s, his career had largely faded from the mainstream. In 1994, he appeared in Ipi Tombi, a South African-produced film based on a musical, though the project received little attention. In 1995, he co-starred with Clint Howard in Ice Cream Man, a black comedy cha-cha horror film that had a limited theatrical release but later became a cult favorite due to its unintentional comedy and over-the-top horror elements. His personal troubles continued to affect his career. In 1996, while in the hospital recovering from a serious car accident, Vincent was still contractually committed to a role in the low-budget action film Redline, co-starring Chad McQueen. He appeared in the film with visible facial swelling, scars, and even his hospital ID bracelet still on his wrist, a sad reflection of how his career had deteriorated. By the late 1990s, his appearances became increasingly sporadic. In 1997, he had a small guest role in Nash Bridges, playing the title character's long-lost brother in a brief but nostalgic return to television. In 1998, he made a cameo in the independent film Buffalo 66, though by this time he was barely recognizable compared to his former self. His final film appearance came in 2003 in White Boy, also released as Menace for the U.S. video market, an independent film that went largely unnoticed. After that, he vanished from Hollywood altogether, retreating into a life of health struggles, financial difficulties, and seclusion. Success in Hollywood can be intoxicating, and for Jan-Michael Vincent, the fame and fortune that came with Airwolf only fueled his self-destructive tendencies. By the late 1970s, at the peak of his career, he had already begun to spiral into substance abuse. Cocaine and alcohol became his vices, turning the once disciplined and promising actor into an unpredictable and unreliable figure, both on and off screen. Despite his rugged, on-screen persona, Jan-Michael struggled with inner demons that seemed to grow stronger as his fame increased. The party lifestyle of Hollywood in the late 70s and 80s was relentless, and he fully embraced it. Arrests for drug possession became frequent, 3 consecutive years, from 1977 to 1979, saw him charged with cocaine-related offenses. It was during this same period that his first marriage collapsed. His personal life was in chaos, and his growing reputation for reckless behavior began to overshadow his acting career. By the time Airwolf aired in 1984, Jan-Michael had reached a level of success most actors could only dream of. He was the highest-paid actor on television, earning $200,000 per episode. But behind the scenes, he was barely holding it together. Alcohol and drug use had become a daily routine, affecting not just his performance but the production of the show itself. He frequently arrived on set intoxicated, unable to remember his lines, and at times struggled just to stand properly. Directors and co-stars grew frustrated as filming delays became more frequent. The network had invested heavily in the show, but Jan-Michael's deteriorating condition made it increasingly difficult to justify keeping him on board. By the third season, his behavior had become too much to handle. The once polished and charismatic lead actor was now a liability. His addiction-fueled outburst, erratic behavior, and lack of professionalism caused major production setbacks, forcing the show's cancellation after season 3. It was a devastating blow, not just for Airwolf fans, but for Jan-Michael himself. He had reached the height of television stardom, only to throw it all away. After Airwolf, his career never recovered. The major studios that once lined up to work with him turned their backs, unwilling to take the risk of hiring someone so unstable. While he managed to land a few minor roles in television movies and direct-to-video films throughout the late 80s, the era of Jan-Michael Vincent as a leading man was over. The transition from Hollywood's golden boy to a fading star happened rapidly, and instead of blockbuster films, he found himself relegated to low-budget productions that barely made an impact. As his career fell apart, his personal life continued its downward spiral. The bar fights and legal troubles that had plagued him in his younger years only intensified. In 1984 and 1985, during the height of his Airwolf fame, he was arrested multiple times for drunken brawls. In 1986, he was accused of assaulting a woman in his home, though his lawyer argued that the incident was an accident, leading to an acquittal. His second marriage ended in allegations of domestic violence, and in 2000, an ex-girlfriend came forward with a shocking claim. She alleged that he had assaulted her while she was pregnant, leading to a miscarriage. By the 1990s, Jan-Michael Vincent had become a cautionary tale, a Hollywood star who had it all and lost it due to addiction and self-destruction. Arrested for drunk driving in 1988, he avoided prison by agreeing to enter rehab, but it did little to change his behavior. His struggles with alcohol continued, leading to 3 near-fatal car accidents in the 1990s. The most serious occurred in 1996, leaving him with multiple broken vertebrae and requiring an emergency tracheotomy at the scene. The accident permanently damaged his voice, leaving him with a raspy, weakened tone that served as a haunting reminder of his self-inflicted downfall. Hollywood had long since moved on, and by the late 90s he was reduced to taking whatever roles he could get, including low-budget slasher films and erotic thrillers. The star who had once been the face of primetime television was now struggling to find work at all. He made his last television appearance in a 1997 episode of Nash Bridges, and his final film role in 2003's White Boy. By then, he was barely recognizable, a frail, defeated version of the once powerful leading man who had captivated audiences decades earlier. By the time the 1990s arrived, Jan-Michael Vincent was no longer the Hollywood golden boy he had once been. The once dashing star of Airwolf and numerous hit films had become a shadow of his former self. Years of substance abuse had not only destroyed his career, but had also begun to take a devastating toll on his body. His name, which had once commanded admiration and excitement, was now synonymous with scandal, addiction, and missed opportunities. Offers from major studios had disappeared, and he was left taking whatever minor roles he could find. But even as the cameras stopped rolling, his personal struggles only intensified. The reckless lifestyle he had embraced in his youth, the late nights, the drinking, the drugs, the dangerous behavior, was now catching up to him in the most brutal way. His body was breaking down, and a series of near-fatal car accidents made it clear that he was on a path of self-destruction. Between 1992 and 1996, he was involved in multiple severe crashes, each one leaving him with more damage than the last. The most catastrophic occurred in 1996 when he lost control of his vehicle and suffered life-threatening injuries. The crash shattered 3 vertebrae in his neck, leaving him in unbearable pain. Emergency responders had to perform a tracheotomy at the scene, a desperate measure to save his life. Though he survived, the accident left him permanently changed. His voice, once strong and commanding, was now hoarse and raspy, a cruel reminder of how much he had lost. Despite his brush with death, Jan-Michael made no real effort to change. He continued drinking heavily, numbing himself to the reality of his decline. The man who had once been the embodiment of youthful masculinity, athletic, confident, charismatic, was now barely recognizable. His once sharp features had become bloated and tired, his body weakened by years of abuse. Public sightings became rare, and when he did appear in interviews, he seemed distant and uninterested. At times, he struggled to recall details about his past, either unwilling or unable to face the memories of what he once had. By the early 2000s, his health was in freefall. The years of excessive drinking had ravaged his body, leading to a series of severe medical complications. But the most devastating blow came in 2012, when doctors were forced to amputate his right leg due to an infection caused by peripheral artery disease, a condition often linked to long-term alcohol abuse. The man who had once performed high-energy stunts on screen, who had been admired for his physicality and presence, was now confined to a wheelchair, reliant on a prosthetic limb. His final years were marked by financial struggles and isolation. The fortune he had once amassed from Airwolf and his Hollywood success was long gone. In a 2014 interview, he openly admitted that he had no idea how much money he had left. The man who had once been one of television's highest-paid actors was now struggling to afford medical care. Even in these moments, there was a sense of resignation in his voice, as if he had long accepted his fate. When asked about his past success, he often dismissed it, as though it belonged to another lifetime, to someone he no longer recognized. On February 10, 2019, Jan-Michael Vincent passed away at the age of 74 in a hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. His cause of death was cardiac arrest, a direct result of bradycardia, a condition where the heart beats too slowly to sustain proper circulation. Though his death certificate listed the official cause as heart failure, it was widely understood that the real culprit had been years of substance abuse, physical trauma, and declining health. His body, battered by decades of excess, had finally given out. What was perhaps most tragic was the lack of public attention surrounding his passing. There was no widespread media coverage, no major Hollywood tributes, no emotional farewells from former co-stars. Unlike other fallen actors whose deaths spark waves of nostalgia and heartfelt remembrances, Jan-Michael's departure was quiet, almost unnoticed. The industry that had once celebrated him had long since moved on. He had become a relic of a bygone era, a faded name in the history of Hollywood, a stark contrast to the roaring fame he once commanded. For those who had followed his career, his death felt like an inevitability rather than a shock. Jan-Michael Vincent had been on a downward trajectory for decades, each scandal, arrest, and health scare pushing him further into obscurity. His story had long since become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how fame, if not handled wisely, can be as destructive as it is rewarding. He had all the ingredients for an enduring Hollywood legacy: raw talent, striking good looks, and an undeniable screen presence. But he lacked the discipline to sustain it. He reached the heights of television stardom, earning a record-breaking $200,000 per episode on Airwolf, only to squander his career and fortune in the years that followed. Yet, despite the tragic nature of his downfall, his legacy remains through the roles he played. For many fans, he will always be remembered as Stringfellow Hawk, the brooding, enigmatic pilot of Airwolf, a character that became an 80s television icon. Others recall his performances in films like The Mechanic, Hooper, and White Line Fever, where his effortless charisma and rebellious energy made him one of the most captivating actors of his time. Even in his later, lesser-known roles, there were flashes of the man he could have been, the actor who under different circumstances might have cemented his name alongside Hollywood's greatest. His life serves as a reminder that talent alone is never enough. Many actors have the looks, the charm, and the raw ability to succeed, but sustaining success requires something more: discipline, resilience, and the ability to resist the temptations that come with fame. Jan-Michael Vincent had it all and lost it all. His story is not just about Hollywood glamour, it is about the fragility of success, the price of excess, and the haunting power of self-destruction. In the end, he was a star who burned brightly but faded too soon, leaving behind both a body of work that fans still cherish and a story that serves as a warning for those who dream of Hollywood stardom.